Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we have 5 more of the Captivz Jurassic World figures to take a look at. This time, we have a brand new version of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, another Velociraptor Blue. We've got ourselves a bronze, copperish type of Indoraptor, which is one of the rare figures. We also have a Stygimoloch, and then a brand new species to the line, which is the Dimorphodon. So pretty much just like the last round where we had 4 figures that were just re-released as far as different paint variants go, except for maybe the Indoraptor might actually be the same as the previous one. It's tough to tell. And then we have a brand new species, which this time again is the Dimorphodon. It is exciting to see a second pterosaur get released into the line, as we previously have only had the Pteranodon, I think. So it's very cool to now see a Dimorphodon in the line as well. And honestly, I think these figures, some of them are definitely my favorite versions of these figures released, and the Tyrannosaurus for sure is my favorite out of the 2 variants of the greenish version of the Tyrannosaurus. I really like this one more than the previous one, maybe even more than the original brownish one. It's really hard to tell, but the Velociraptor Blue, even though it's not exactly the color of blue, as this one has a greenish tint to her, is also really nice. It's kind of tough to tell if I like that one better or the last release as far as blue goes. But as usual, just like with the last review, we will bring the previous versions in here to take a look at with the newest versions. So let's go ahead, jump straight to a closer look at these right now. So starting with Velociraptor Blue, again, just like the previous round of these figures, any ones that we've reviewed in the past sculpt-wise, we don't need to take a look at the sculpts again. We just really need to look at what's different compared to the previous versions, and that would usually be the coloration. And with this Velociraptor Blue, almost everything seems to be the same, except for rather than the grayish color that we usually have, we have a really nice greenish tint to her on this one, which is very cool, and honestly looks way more appealing than I expected it to. Like, you could see that we have, of course, that nice dark wash like we had on the last one, but we have, again, actually, let's turn, the tail was not in the right spot, but we, of course, have a greenish tint to this one instead of the grayish tint. The blue stripe looks pretty much the same as far as the previous one goes, I think. And we do have some kind of like scars here on the side as far as like a wound. I'm thinking the white versions here are like scars. When we have the red, that's probably an open wound. This one here, just like with the Dilophosaurus, we have more of like scars on the side of blue, but again, the coloration looks really good, really natural as far as the application goes, and the dark wash really ties the color together. You can see we've got yellow eyes with a black pupil. The inside of the mouth sports kind of like a light purple as far as the color, maybe like a pink, it's tough to tell as far as the coloration goes, and the teeth are all painted pretty nicely for what they are, being so small. But if we bring the previous version in, you can see that on this one we had the gray. It's actually like a really dark gray, almost bordering on a blackish gray. And again, the stripes and everything look pretty much the same. The blue stripe that runs down the course of blue, the tone of color might be slightly different, but it doesn't look too different. The eye coloration is definitely different, as the older one has more of an orangish eye. The newer one has a yellow eye. But again, you can really pick out the greenish tint to the newer one that was not present on the older one. We don't really seem to have any difference in color or anything anywhere else. Although I will say we had painted nails on the previous version. We don't have painted nails actually on the newer one, which is very interesting. The tones of the inside of the mouth are very similar, but slightly different. You can definitely see a slight difference in color there. But again, there's not really too much else going on different coloration-wise or anything like that, aside from the greenish tint. And, of course, the eyes and the lack of paint on the nails, and then, of course, the scar on the other side. But another really cool blue. I really do like it, even though it's very different as far as the coloration goes. I didn't realize how nice blue would look in a greenish coloration until I saw this figure. And then we have the Bronze Indoraptor, and I honestly think this figure is exactly the same one as the previous release, which it was one of the rare figures. Oh, the tail's not on all the way. It's one of the rare figures from the previous line, so it is pretty fun to have an opportunity to get it again, because again, these ones are definitely a little bit less abundant, a little harder to find, so it's pretty cool to have a chance again to get it as the lines pass. You may not get it the first time, you can get it the second time, and here's the previous version, if I can get it to stay in my hand. And it does honestly look like there is a slight difference, very slight. I feel like this newer one is a slightly darker shade of color than the older one, but it's really hard to tell. and I can only really pick up on that in the light. So I think there is just, again, a little hint of difference. Boy, this one's really slippery for some reason. A little hint of difference in the tones of color used, but primarily the bronze-ish version, copper version, whatever you'd like to call it, is very, very similar to the older one. And then we've got ourselves the Stygimoloch, and the Stygimoloch as well is extremely similar to the previous one, but I definitely feel like it's slightly different. So what we see on this one is basically like a reddish brown tone of color. There is also a dark wash, but it's a very subtle application to the dark wash. You almost can't even pick up on it in certain areas. Like, it is present in the face, but it doesn't stand out all that much until you get to the back, and that's kind of the way they've applied this blackish coloration here to the back, is with a wash, so it kind of creeps in and out of the scales really nicely, which I do really quite like that. The spikes of the Stygimoloch do have a variation of color to them, as we have like a dark gray, but there's also some white applied, so that's pretty cool to actually have some variation of color included in that area. The eyes are painted with a black, and there's no other coloration, no pupil or anything. We have like a yellowish tone, kind of, almost like a yellowish green. For the beak of the Stygimoloch, as well as the inside of the mouth, has like a reddish tone of color for the tongue. And then again, we do have some wounds here, or in this case, I think maybe scars on the side of the neck of the Stygimoloch, which is something that the other one definitely did not have. And that's definitely a difference between this one and that one. We also have some light coloration here for the underside of the stomach of the Stygimoloch, and then in the throat, it's almost like a variation of a green in the throat, similar to the color of the beak. But if we bring the older one into compare and contrast, you can definitely see that there are, without question, some differences between the two. The overall body coloration, like back here, looks pretty much the same. The wash might be just a little bit darker on the newer one, but I don't think that's like any real difference in color that's been changed. I think that's just the way it was applied, and since every figure, of course, would be hand painted, that's just the way they'll turn out. But you can see straight away up here on the top of the head that the domes of the head of the Stygimoloch are different as far as the tones of color used. We have a much more vibrant, lighter tone of color on the older one, whereas this one just has like more of like a slight dry brushing than anything. The beaks are also quite different as far as the tones of color, as the newer one has more of a greenish tone. The older one definitely had a gray. I think even the heads look slightly different as far as the coloration goes, but the underside as well has a different coloration, as the newer one has a little bit of a lighter tone of color, and it's not quite as abundant as what we see on the older one. And then we also don't have like that greenish tone in the throat, and of course the scars there are also different. So certainly some differences between the older one and the newer one, and that is awesome. I love that they don't just straight up re-release, repacks of the previous figures. We at least do get some difference in color. But I will also state that I love the sculpt of that Stygimoloch. Easily my favorite Stygimoloch figure that I have as far as a Jurassic version in my collection, no questions asked. And then we got ourselves the Tyrannosaurus Rex. And again, the sculpt is the same as the previous one, but the paint is really nice on this one compared to the previous one. You can see that as far as the coloration goes, we have a green for the primary body color, and we also have stripes, and that's really about it as far as the coloration goes. Up here on the upper part of the body, we do have just a dark green. Again, no real difference of color for the underside compared to the upper side, but I really love the appearance, and the stripes just make such a huge difference as far as the coloration goes and the appeal factor of the Rex. You can see that we have a purplish tone there for the inside of the mouth, and we also have the very nicely painted teeth. But one thing that we have on this one are some scars, as we have two areas that have been striped over, one on the top of the head, one down through the palate of the Tyrannosaurus. The eye is also really quite nicely placed over here. And then that's really about it as far as the difference in coloration goes. The sculpt is gorgeous with a really nice kind of rearing up, roaring Rexy type of a look, because originally this was a Rexy sculpt. And then to show you the difference between this one and the other one, you can definitely see there is a big difference in coloration between the newer one and the older one. The older one does have a very dark green, similar tone of dark green, but not quite the same. And we don't have the stripes on the older one. We also have more of a dry brushing throughout with kind of a lighter green. We do have painted nails on the older one with a black. We don't have painted nails on the newer one. And we also have more of a dry brushing on the underside with that same green, and we don't have that on the newer one. And then, of course, the scars there on the face are something that are also new as far as additions of paintwork go. But that's really about it. But in my opinion, again, the newer one is much more superior than the older one. And then the only new figure in this round as far as new species goes is the Dimorphodon. And you can see the head sculpt looks pretty good as far as the detailing goes, but the head sculpt absolutely looks like really big in comparison to the body. So it's a little bit larger than it should be, similar to their Stegosaurus. Their Stegosaurus also had a larger head sculpt than the body than what it should probably have. So not the first time we've seen that in the Captivz line. You can see the eyes are painted with a yellow, given a black pupil. We primarily have a gray coloration for the body, but it also has a dry brushing with kind of like a light gray throughout to bring the detail out. You can see the inside of the mouth is painted with a purplish tone of color, and we have the teeth that are actually really quite nicely painted. The Dimorphodon is in a very tensed position as far as it kind of letting out some sort of a vocalization. It's obviously landed, the wings are down, so it looks like it's trying to threaten something, maybe scare it away, or maybe it's about to attack. I'm not 100% sure, but again, the wings are down on the ground. You can see the hands are planted right there. They're also quite nicely sculpted, but no nail paint. The underside to the pterosaur does sport a yellowish coloration for the undersides of the wings. It's just been basically dry brushed over so that the skin texture pops pretty nicely on it. Unfortunately, the leg of mine is bowed, I think just due to the way it was in the package. So I'll have to give this the warm water, cold water trick and try to, put that back the way it should be. If we take a look here at the top of the pterosaur, you can kind of see like some pycnofibers picking up there, leading back from the back of the head into the neck region. You also see a really nice looking striping that runs out the course of the tail, which I really like that striping. Very subtle as far as the way it's applied, but it looks beautiful and plays off of the gray coloration quite nicely. The underside also sports some okay detail, but it's actually a little bare, honestly, as far as detail goes here on the underside. It's not as vibrant as what I'm used to when it comes to the Toy Monster figures. You can see that trademark Dimorphodon tip to the tail right there. And over here we also have wounds, again, like I was stating earlier, where the white, when they have white stripes, I feel like it's more like scars, and then they have the red that's more like an open wound, and you can see this one does sport an open wound. So pretty fun Dimorphodon, and another really cool species to finally add to the Captivz line. And just like with the other ones, when we have the figures like this that are kind of popped together, pieced together, we sort of have articulation. So with Blue, you would have that in the neck as well as the tail. Again, I technically don't really think it's meant to be articulation. You just place them together that way. But it works as far as articulation goes. The only problem I ever have with Blue is Blue's like that one raptor that never wants to stand for me. There we go. There's always that sweet spot where they will stand, but I have the hardest time finding it. The Rex, again, has it in the neck, the tail as well. Really nicely done and stands, of course, beautifully. There we go. It just has the tail touch, so that's the way it stands. The Dimorphodon only has articulation in the head, and that's pretty much what you would expect as far as that one goes. And then we also have the Indoraptor, which, just like the first Indoraptor, has the neck and tail as far as the way it's applied and kind of articulates. And then the Stygimoloch, same deal as far as the head and then the tail. So really cool as far as that goes. If I can find the sweet spot, there we go. They're all standing quite nicely. As far as a size goes, they are small. So for a size, I think we'll measure, actually we'll probably measure the Dimorphodon since that's the newest one. So for a length, due to that like bowed leg, it's not standing right now, but I'm certain if I fixed the leg, of course it would stand. Now I just took them all out. It would stand perfectly fine. But for a length, you're looking at about 2 3/4 inches, or just a hair under the 7 centimeter range. And for a height, the highest point would be the wingtip. So if we look right here, you're looking at about a little over 1.5 inches, or about 4 centimeters roughly. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon in comparison to our Captivz Clash Edition Jurassic World figures, and you can definitely see that, just like with the others, they are very small. They all sport a very small size overall, and I feel like that's always one of the things that makes them so impressive, because they are extremely small but sport insane amounts of detail and beautiful paintwork for something as small as they are, making them, in my opinion, easily the most impressive Jurassic World minis that I've ever seen. So yet again, just like with the last round, we have 5 new figures, 4 new repaints, and 1 new species included with this round right here, rounding us out to 10 of the brand new figures we've taken a look at so far. We of course have the Dimorphodon, which is the only new species in this particular video that we are entering into the Captivz line, with a pretty fun looking sculpt, kind of in a almost a dramatic pose as it's letting out some sort of a vocalization, looking all tense and obviously trying to either scare something away or it's about to attack. It looks pretty cool as far as the sculpt goes. The only real downside is the fact that some of the detail on that one is a little muted, and the head sculpt definitely looks a little bit bigger than it should be, but it's still a pretty fun figure and definitely a fun addition to the Captivz line. The Tyrannosaurus is, in my opinion, my favorite out of all of the Tyrannosaurs that has released from the Captivz line so far. I absolutely love the striping down the course of the body. I do like the greenish tone for the body. The, of course, sculpt is fantastic. But again, the paintwork on this newest one is definitely really quite nice and very appealing looking. The Stygimoloch is very similar to the previous version, but I do like that fact. I like that it's very similar but has its own differences rather than giving us a straight up repack. We do have some slight alterations to the coloration, and it looks really good, still sticking with that Jurassic World coloration, so it looks kind of screen accurate as far as what we see in the film, coloration wise on a mini, but also still sports a little bit of difference and its own individuality. Another really nice looking version of the Stygimoloch, and in my opinion, the best version out there currently as far as a Stygimoloch Jurassic World figure goes. We also have Velociraptor Blue, who has a nice new greenish type of a coloration, which I do really quite like. Again, I like the fact that they've given us something slightly different without straying too far from what Velociraptor Blue looks like, so kudos to Toymonster International for doing that, and I also never realized how nice Blue looks in a green coloration until I saw this figure. She actually looks really good with the greenish tones of color, so another fun version of Velociraptor Blue. And then we have the Indoraptor, the copperish, bronzish type of an Indoraptor, and I really do like these. Initially, I kind of set out not liking them too much because I'm never a big fan of that kind of almost statue-like look for figures. But I think it was honestly the Toymonster International line that has changed my opinion on that, and I'm becoming more and more fond of it as time goes on. And specifically, like, the Toymonster International versions are really nice. I love the coloration they've added to it with a very nice copper type of a look or bronze type of a look with a beautiful shine on the figure, looking pretty much like a statue, and it's very appealing to me now, and I've become again a much bigger fan of it after Toymonster International introduced their figures with that type of coloration. So 5 more awesome figures to the Captivz line. Hopefully we'll be able to acquire the rest and review them here on the channel very soon. So make sure you head to your local Walmart, your local Meijer, or Five Below store, as all 3 of those stores are said to be selling these Captivz Jurassic World figures, and pick yourself up some of these fantastic minis today, and make sure you also like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.